number of layoffs coming, and I'm glad that we're going to touch on that in this segment, or should I say in this part of what I'm trying to say is this is Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and I've got Jeff Gove in the Kearney office and Tim Kulhanek in the Lincoln office. We've got the band back together here a little bit, Jackie Selby. So let's talk about this. Some people are facing, some businesses, parts of the government, so on and so forth, are facing some layoffs because budget cuts, because we could point fingers in a lot of different directions. But from your perspective, Jeff, how can folks deal with this? Is it a pension rework, if you will? Are you able to help people with their pensions? And
yeah, I mean, if this is something you're facing, there's a lot of different variables. How old are you? Are you wanting to go back into the workforce? What is the offer that they're giving you? But for a lot of people, that we have coming in, there's a factory here in town that is facing some of this. Eaton Manufacturing is laying off a lot of people or terminating a lot of people with buyouts. So, it's a good opportunity to kind of start to put together a plan if you haven't already to see, do I need to go back to work? What steps should I take to make sure that I'm taken care of? Even if you do go back to work, do we take a little bit of time off? There's a lot of different things to look at, but like I said, if you're, in your late 50s, early 60s, mid 60s, it's a great opportunity to look at, okay, this is what I have. I still have a pension. I have my 401k. I have Social Security. Is this an opportunity for me to just retire and maybe just go do what I want to do? Even if you work part-time, get the part-time job that you've wanted. So you're working because you want to, not because you have to.
Great. Very good stuff. And I wanted to present the idea that in my retirement, I may go and follow the Savannah bananas in my van. Jeff.
Yeah, you should do that. You got to get the van first.
I know I have to get my van first, but somebody did provide me with some Savannah banana. I got a T-shirt and a banana ball and a felt tip pen a Sharpie so I can get some autographs when I do go catch a game. But they're always all sold out. But what is it that you want to do in your retirement? This is something I know that you talk to your clients about when they come in to see you. Stonebridge is reachable on this 866 number. That's a centralized number, 866-295-5146. And I say that because they have offices all across, the state, let alone they can help you wherever you are in the Midwest. So 866-295-5146. Now, speaking of the pension, can you help people decide whether they want the joint and survivor benefits or however that works if they're offered a payout? Mr. Kulhanek, because you can look at what would be more advantageous for their situation, right?
You can, and I think they do these studies every year, and the results really never change. I think roughly 2/3 of Americans, according to the most recent study from Allianz, said that they were worried or very worried about running out of money before running out of life, and so that's where a true pension, something that's guaranteed income, and that's really what I want to focus on is it doesn't really matter what you call it. It's guaranteed income for life that people are looking for, and it can be structured different ways, but it gives people a lot more confidence and kind of a license to spend in retirement. And so the math you have to do is you just kind of do just say it's a case study and it's, Betty and Bill, and, Betty has been offered a buyout and she can either take a lump sum and, sail off into the sunset, or she can use one of the reduced joint and survivor options. And so you start analyzing things like, what's your current age? What's longevity and health like in your family? What's your current health status? And you do that for both spouses, not just one or the other. Because at the end of the day, if you're doing a joint and survivor, it means it's guaranteed for both lives. If you do life only, it's guaranteed for just one life. And I've seen, we've been doing this a long time. And in 15 years, you see a lot of different things. And so I've seen scenarios where folks chose life only thinking, I'm sure that I'll, outlive my spouse here. And it depends on where you're retiring from, but you'd be surprised. It doesn't always pay off that much to take the life only, to take all that longevity, the mortality risk, because, let's say that, for example, you'd get $4,000 a month if you use life only, and you're thinking, I want to get the most for me because I think I'm going to outlive, Bill here in my example. Well, what if to take the joint and survivors, 100% joint and survivor, only knock that down from $4,000 to like $3,800 a month? It's really not that much of a difference, and it might be worth $2,400 a year to guarantee that if something were to happen, the pay doesn't go from $4,000 to zero.
Oh,
You know what I mean? So you have to do that analysis. And like, there's different things we can do. First, we want to make sure that you're ready to retire and that you don't need to find work elsewhere. But then we can say, okay, well, what's the payout rate? So in other words, it's not just the dollar amount. It's the dollar amount as a kind of a feature or a function of the overall lump sum that is available. So in other words, if that $48,000 that I threw out as an example was out of $1 million, you're at a 4.8% payout rate. That's okay for a pension, but it's not great, actually. And so then we start looking at things like, well, do you need that much? Could you maybe do better if you took the lump sum and get a higher payout somewhere else, maybe with your own annuity? Like when Kawasaki here recently terminated their pension plan, we were getting substantially higher payout rates on just privately owned, like one-on-one, your own personal annuity, than what the annuities that they were offering were generating. And so maybe if I want to be able to have access, maybe I need right at 40,000 and I can reverse solve. And because I can get a higher payout rate somewhere else, maybe I can take 800,000 instead of $1 million, and or 700,000 instead of $1 million, and get the 40,000 a year that I need to fill my income gap. And then I have 300,000 left over that I can do whatever I want with, and I can use it for more discretionary purposes, those bucket list types of items. So that's really what we're looking at when we're doing these types of calculations.
very good stuff. The number again to reach Stonebridge, 866-295-5146. Because if you have someone in your family or it's you who's going to be affected by such a mass layoff, if you will, we don't mean to be negative here on the show, but these things happen. And if you're offered a lump sum or a pension option, boy, these guys can help you work it out. Before you say yes or sign on the dotted line, you might want to get a little bit of advice. And if you're not working with them for your entire retirement, you should be probably 866-295-5146. Because I feel like there's a lot of risk involved in just, Jeff, jumping into whatever they want you to sign. There could be, residual regret.
Yeah, and with the pension specifically, you have one time you make one decision and you're stuck with that decision for the rest of your life. So there might be an advisor out there that is recommending that you take the lump sum because, guess what? If you take the lump sum, that means that individual gets to manage that money for you, which means they get paid. But it might be in your best interest to leave the money there and to take it as an income stream. But then we got to do it right. If you did single life, that means if you die after the first payment, the insurance company keeps all the money. So we want to make sure, like Tim was saying, that, if you're married, let's cover both of your lives, if it makes sense, where that money's going to last as long as both of you live. There are several options. So you need to make sure you understand what all of your options are and then see how that fits into your plan. In the retirement compass, we start with the income plan. So that's the foundation of what we're doing. So we want to make sure you have the income that you're taking care of in your retirement, that, those concerns that everyone has, that am I going to outlive my money? We want to check that box first. And that pension is a big part of that and Social Security. So we got to make good decisions with those two things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, again, just make sure you understand all the options. There's sometimes a life with 10 years certain, which means it'll pay for your life or 10 years, whichever's longer. So then you can name beneficiaries. Oh. For my mom, that's what we had her do. Oh. She worked at the hospital here in Kearney, and, the pension made sense for her because that payout rate was really high. We were going to have to take out 8-9% per year if she rolled it out, which would have meant she's probably going to run out of money. So we left it there. So she's got a guaranteed paycheck for the rest of her life. And I think hers was 10 years certain. So if she would have died in the first 10 years, then me and my siblings would get those payments for the remaining period. But lots of options. Just make sure that you make the right decision because you have one opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Good to consult with a professional before you leap. I feel like I'm going to give out the number and a little bit of information, and then we'll jump to the next segment, fellas. 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Call Stonebridge Wealth Systems if you would like to check out the new YouTube page and see the fellows wearing some red today, some Nebraska red. You could go to YouTube, and it's Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Should you like, you could tell your friends about that. It may be, I don't know if I want. Well, just have a look at what they see. And we also have in podcast form all of our previous shows up on their website, which is stonebridgeiwm.com. Now, they want to get you to go where you want to go in your retirement. And if you face one of these types of things where you get the pink slip and they're like, we're getting rid of the whole department, be sure to call Stonebridge so you don't miss out on some great opportunities for yourself and your monies. Again, on the number, it's 866-295-5146. Be right back.
Is your retirement being eaten up by financial termites like hidden fees, inflation, and avoidable taxes? Call today for a complimentary financial review so we can help you root out these retirement killers.
You've joined us on a very special day. It's nobody's birthday. It's just a very special day because you found the radio show here. It's Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and I have Jeff Gove, principal in the company, and he's in the Kearney office, and I have Tim Kulhanek, principal, founder, whatever you guys call yourselves. I don't know. It's fun to have titles. On the other hand, Tim finds himself very busy. Very, very busy. Plus 3 little ones at home. Oh,
right.
My goodness sakes. This falls into it. But let's talk about the Retirement Compass, Jeff, and possibly a scenario situation. Can I throw some numbers at you just randomly here?
Sure.
Okay. Imagine you have a couple that's 62. They have $1 million combined in their 401ks, and they're thinking about getting retired sooner than later. They might even want to establish a personal pension, and they want to understand how all this stuff works. What would be the first step or the first point on the compass?
Yeah, so we talk all the time on the radio about the retirement compass, and it starts with an income plan, creating that foundation that allows you to retire the way you want to, maintain your lifestyle through retirement. So Tim, do you want to talk about the income plan and what we're covering there?
Great.
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to realize is that this couple is 62, so they're not eligible for what, Jackie?
They're not eligible for either their Medicare or their Social Security.
Well, they could
Social
take
Security.
early Social Security, but they're not eligible for Medicare.
So we're gonna
and they're
have to-
not eligible for full Social Security benefits. And
Right,
so
we're going to have to gap them up, right, with some medical?
Yeah, so the first thing we're doing before we even get to that is we're trying to figure out, can you afford to do this? And so from an income planning perspective, we're weighing the pros and cons of filing early versus late for Social Security. And if they both have the same amount in their 401ks, that's a little bit of a clue that maybe their earnings have been roughly the same because they were able to save roughly the same amount. That's not always the case. It could be that one of them earned substantially more, but just put less in their 401k because they mainly lived off that person's paycheck, and the other person socked the majority of their account away.
It happens.
So we're trying to figure some of these things out. And that's why when folks come in, we want to make sure that we're looking actually at their Social Security statements. We help them get logged into SSA.gov to make sure that you get the most up-to-date, accurate information, to make sure that the statement itself is accurate. I know Jeff can tell you that we found errors before.
Oh, dear.
Where maybe there was earnings that were omitted that shouldn't have been, miscalculations, those sorts of things. So we make a determination, and like if you had a scenario where one spouse earns substantially higher than the other, and it happened to be, in this case, let's say that it's the man and the male and the female is in better health. I'm just throwing out some things that we tend to see, and has more longevity in her family. Our goal is to, if we're going to delay one of the benefits, it's going to be the higher of the two, but we might not need to delay both. So maybe we realize that, okay, they need this much. we can start cutting into that gap first by maybe having her take early Social Security, because no matter how long she delays, she's never going to get her benefit built up to be more than what his is. So if we're going to delay one of them, maybe we'll lean more towards delaying his, and then we've cut into the gap some, and then we can start filling in with those other resources and figuring out, do we need to take a portion of the nest egg and do some sort of guaranteed income strategy? And a lot of it has to do with things like risk tolerance and other calculations that make sure that it's a good fit. Some people, regardless of their age isn't the, I think, sole variable that should be used to determine things like risk tolerance. But that's where we start is, what are your income? What are your expenses? There's simple ways that you can calculate what your expenses are. It doesn't hurt to try out your budget, by the way, before you retire. So figure out, what do I want to be able to live on in retirement? And then for maybe 6 to 12 months before you actually pull the trigger on retirement, make sure you can actually live on that budget. And if you can't, then we just adjust from there.
Okay, great. We're off to a good start here. By the way, the phone number to reach the firm is 866-295-5146. Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. All right, Jeff, let's go to the next point on our compass.
Yeah, so then we get to the investment plan. So now that we're looking at your investments, we've got the income figured out, right? I mean, you've got, let's say this couple needed, they said they had $1 million in their 401k. We didn't break it out, but it doesn't matter. Okay. They have $1 million in their 401k. They're 62. From an income perspective, if they have options, I mean, they could both draw at 62 and help that fill their income gap. I've got some people that when they retire at 62, that Social Security would be enough to pay all of their expenses. So maybe that makes sense, instead of utilizing their own assets, spending down their own accounts. Maybe it makes sense to draw Social Security, but everybody's case is different. So, but now that we have the income covered, now we're looking at the investments, and we're going to look at, how do I invest this according to your risk tolerance to give you the most growth that you get to keep? And Tim will talk about the tax plan coming up, but making sure the right assets are in the right account. So, for example, if you have, we talk about tax buckets. There's a taxable account where you're going to get a 1099 every year. So if you have a CD, you're paying income tax on that every year. You're going to get that 1099 in the mail.
Yes.
And that could impact your taxes on Social Security, could impact long-term capital gains. It could be a lot more tax than what you think on that. So just making sure, again, we have the right assets in the right accounts. Okay. So that's taxable. We have tax deferred. So that's the money we put in our 401k and IRAs. And at our workshops, I always ask people, if you have a 401k, why did you put money in there? And they say, because I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket when I retire. I can tell you that usually isn't the case. When you look at the actual impact of taxes on your retirement, it's tax deferred. There are certain assets we want in that tax deferred bucket. And then we have the tax free bucket. So with that bucket, all of the growth is yours. So if for our ag clients out there, would you rather pay tax on the seed when you plant it or on the harvest? A Roth IRA, you're paying tax on the seed. All of the harvest, when it multiplies, the whole thing is yours. So that's what we want to do. That's that tax-free Roth bucket. So obviously that's going to be our more aggressive account, when we build this out, because all the growth is yours. If we're going to have something that does, double-digit returns potentially, that's the one we want. We want everything to grow, but it's all about what you keep. And then we get into the tax plan. Tim, you want to jump on that?
All right, here comes the tax man.
You ready?
Tim the tax man, I sure
How long
am.
do we have?
Oh, gosh, you got a couple minutes here. You have 4 minutes. Is that going to be enough?
4 minutes. 4 minutes is never enough for Tim Kulhanek. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah, at the end of the day, I think Jeff actually outlined it pretty good. We use, when we're doing the retirement compass, our process when folks come in is kind of a 3-appointment process. Step 1 is going to be mainly the discovery phase, and we're gathering information. And a lot of that information is qualitative, so we want to know what's important to you when it comes to your money, and what's important to you when it comes to your lifestyle and the things that you want to experience in retirement, and what would a good like so subjective. What does a good retirement look like to you? Let's paint a picture so we understand we're all like driving towards the same ultimate outcome. And step 2 is where we present kind of our best ideas in a single comprehensive solution, which is the retirement compass. And then step 3 is, at the end of that second meeting, we're making a mutual agreement that we're going to either move forward together or part as friends. And when we're looking at those 5 different areas, I think the area we can move the needle the most in is truly the tax planning piece, because most advisors out there, a lot of advisors do great when it comes to tax planning. I meet with them; they're my colleagues. I see them every 6 months at the Ed Slot Elite RA Advisor Group meetings. But a lot of advisors, it's just not what they focus on. It's like, hey, I'm going to manage your money. If you have a tax question, go see your CPA, and that's just not how we do business, because. Like somebody was in just the other day and we're talking about case studies here, and I can actually see it on my whiteboard right now. They were giving money, $14,000 a year between church and charity. 13 went to their church and another 1,000 went to other charities. So $14,000 a year. They were in the 24% tax bracket, federal. Okay. So 24% federal plus 5.2% state. You're talking about 30% of their money was going to taxes. And on $14,000, a third of that, or almost a third of that's $4,200. And I just painted a picture of saying, I drew a triangle. I said, here's your retirement account. You're taking distributions. It's going to your bank. And then you're setting up the direct deposit to take the money from your bank to the charitable organization. What if instead of going this way around, we just took a shortcut and went direct to the church/charity? Would that be something that you'd be open to exploring? They said, well, I guess, but what's the point of that? And the point of that is, now we're utilizing the tax code in our favor, and it's going to save us $4,200 a year in taxes. And actually, it's going to save us more, because in order to net $14,000, they're having to take about $20,000. So I told them, you could take the same amount, you could save the difference, right? You could save the tax money and say, I'm going to save that $5,000 or so, $6,000, or you could say, you know what, I was going to take that money out anyway, right? I already planned on taking that $20,000 out so I could get the 14 to send it to the charity. And again, mind you, these are people who aren't getting a tax benefit at all right now for those contributions. That's a key element of this, because they're filing standard deduction. The standard deduction this year for seniors 65 plus is like $46,700, something insane if your income's below certain thresholds. So by doing it the way that I outlined, I was going to save them $5,000, between $5,000 and $6,000, or allow them to be $5,000 to $6,000 more generous every single year. That's why a tax plan is so critical in getting this right.
I love it. All right. Here's the phone number to reach Stonebridge, 866-295-5146, 866-295-5146. Now, the show is called Retirement Compass Radio Show, and we're going around the compass here and talking about one specific, just a scenario, if you will, and we'll be covering the rest of it. Don't you leave us now. Just getting started, essentially. Again, on their number for Stonebridge, 866-295-5146. Be right back.
As Americans, we strive for better. From a better house to a better career to a better life for our children and grandchildren. Better has become the American way. When it comes to your retirement, what does better mean to you? Does it mean more income, a flexible lifestyle, better solutions? A better retirement begins with a financial plan. To get your complimentary written financial plan, call the number you see here. You only retire once. This is your opportunity to plan for better.
We decided to call this segment of the show Steady Hands in Uncertain Times, here on the Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge Wealth Systems, and that's you, fellas. You're the steady hands here to help people out, whether it's job loss, retiring early. Very many reasons people retire early. Change of scenario, maybe the ill health of a parent, maybe their own health. But what is it, Tim? Half of people retire before they planned on it?
The numbers are kind of across, there's a pretty broad spectrum, but they're kind of staggering. Somewhere between 50 and probably 60%, I'd say. So the vast majority, I think it would be safe to say, I think there was a recent study from Transamerica that this was a 2024 December article in Investopedia that says that 6 in 10 of 2,400 retirees surveyed by Transamerica said that they retired earlier than expected, and many expect to spend about 30 years in retirement. So it's a lot of folks. It's an awful lot of folks out there that will actually retire sooner than they had originally anticipated.
Okay. So what are the, it's for a myriad of reasons, right? And one of the big topics going on right now is job loss and what happens to folks if they're cut or they're, the organization or their, whatever you want to call it, is putting people out on the curb who are in this age group.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to acknowledge that it's not just this age group, right? There's a lot of folks
You're right.
that are, in their 30s and 40s who are being impacted by these things, and we need to be prepared to provide the assistance and the expertise that those folks need as well. And I'll be honest, I think that if you polled clients of Stonebridge and said, why Stonebridge? Why do you choose to work with them? And I'd like to think that the two top reasons they'd give you, the first one would be trust, that they feel confident putting their financial future in the hands of the team members that we've assembled, because we spend a lot of time building culture here. It's something that we're very adamant about, and truth over comfort is one of the tenets of our core values, is that you're going to tell people the truth, whether it's good news, bad news. You're going to be honest with them and give them not what they want to hear. Like right now, we're dealing with, a 5-year-old who we're quickly realizing tells mom and dad what she perceives mom and dad want to hear, whether it's what actually has occurred or not.
Oh, dear.
And it's something that is going to have to be nipped in the bud right away, because that's not a pattern that we want to, have grow and, spread to other areas of life. Well, we don't want to be the type of people and advisors that are going to just tell people, oh, sure, everything's going to be fine. But maybe it will be. And so the first thing I tell folks, if there's a riff or something like that, is, well, let's meet and let's just see where you're at. This is one of the reasons why, we want to make sure that we have the different risk buckets allocated properly. So safety, income, and growth overlaid by liquidity. So safety, you want to make sure that you have an emergency fund. And it's not just because the water heater might go out. It's because you might get that notice, that pink slip. And so making sure that you aren't going to start racking up credit card debt at 25, 27, 28% or whatever it might be, or have to go get a payday loan or something. And you're dealing with, it's not the mafia, but it's approaching it. And so we want to make sure that we're taking care of folks across the continuum from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase. Now, where do we specialize in? Obviously, it's the distribution phase. That was the genesis of the firm, was helping people down off the mountain. But when these things happen, you need a trusted ally in your corner, somebody who's been through it. And, because it's so prevalent that 60% of folks are retiring early, it's something we've been through many, many times. If you go back and look at, it was ConAgra or it was some other corporation. They announced that the Kellogg plant in Omaha is going to be closing, and all these different things. It happens a lot more frequently than you think. And so some folks are going to find out they're ready to retire, and they don't necessarily need to go back to work. Other folks are going to find out, hey, you're on the right track. We're close. Here's when you can, because we want to answer those 3 questions. When can I retire? Will my money last as long as I need it to? And if we're being honest, the other one is like, will my family be okay if something were to happen to me? And we're going to knock all those 3 questions out, make sure that we address them, and tell you the truth about them when you come in and see us.
Here's the number, 866-295-5146. Call Stonebridge, 866-295-5146.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
of doing a little bit of scenario work here on the show. This is Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge on today's oration program, whatever you want to call it. I've got Jeff Gove from Stonebridge in the Kearney office and Tim Kulhanek in the Lincoln office. And we were talking about a couple, this is just a made-up scenario deal, a couple 62 years old, both of them with $1 million in their 401k. All right, and so we want to talk about how to get them, to the finish line happily for their retirement. But what about their health care? Do we need to talk about how to gap that if they want to retire before Medicare at 65?
Yeah, we better have a plan for healthcare. When we put together a plan or when we do workshops, the two biggest expenses that you're going to face in retirement are taxes, which Tim just talked about in the previous segment, and healthcare. Everybody knows the healthcare cost. Typically, people don't understand how much they're going to pay in taxes. But all of these plans, and this is why we developed the Retirement Compass, because all of these plans work together. Your income plan, that tells us how much you need. The investment plan helps us decide, okay, how do we invest this money to get you the income that you need? The tax plan, maybe we need to do Roth conversions. They've got $1 million in their 401k. What happens if they could live on Social Security alone? Because this happens a lot. People come in and they say, you know what? Got $1 million in my 401k. I don't need it. I'm just going to let it grow for the rest of my life. It'll go to my kids. But Jackie, what happens when they turn, depending on when they were born, 73 or 75? They have to start
taking RMDs out of that.
So required minimum distribution. So even if you don't need the money, you have to start taking money out of these accounts. And the reason I'm talking about this in the healthcare plan, you're probably sitting there thinking, we're supposed to be talking about healthcare and we're not. Because all of these things play together. So if let's say you had to take out, $100,000 out of your IRA and you're drawing Social Security, from the tax plan perspective, you're going to pay tax on $100,000 and you're also going to pay tax on 85% of your Social Security now, where before you weren't paying any tax on your Social Security potentially. So that's a problem. Problem number two is there's income ranges where for your Medicare, where you start paying more for your Part B and your drug plan. So you could go from paying, the base premium for your Medicare, your supplement, and your drug plan. And then 2 years later, after you take your first RMD, you get a surprise in the mail. It's a letter from Medicare saying, hey, your Medicare premium is going up significantly. So all of these things play together. Have to have a good tax plan, have to have the income plan, and we have to make sure that your investments are done correctly. I talked about CD income earlier. That could cause you, yes, it's safe income, but it's taxable income. So that could cause you to pay more for your Medicare. So when you look at the yield on those CDs, if you incorporated all of the expenses you're going to be facing, it's going to be a lot lower. We care more about what you keep in your pocket.
Sure.
The other thing, though, is long-term care. If you don't have a plan for long-term care, you go from having a really good outlook on your retirement to, potentially running out of money, leaving your spouse with, not a lot left. And then, when we look at the legacy plan, which Tim will touch on here in a second, if you don't have all these other plans done, you may not even need the legacy plan because you might not have any money left over.
This is why you want to talk to Stonebridge. Use this number. Have the free sit down, 866-295-5146. Get a little bit of a situation x-ray with one of the wonderful, experienced advisors.
When it comes to legacy planning, here's what I found is the thing that I think was most impactful that Jeff said was if you don't take care of these other areas, you probably don't have a legacy plan to even worry about. And so many people spend so much money meeting with all kinds of estate planning attorneys or tax attorneys to try to save money on taxes. I'm thinking of one particular person who never became a client and probably was worked out. That's probably the best for both of us. But all he really cared about is paying as little in taxes as possible. And that's important. We don't want to pay more than your fair share. Judge Learned Hand, he was most famous, impactful probably judge who never made it to the Supreme Court. He was like a district court judge or appellate court judge or whatever it was. But he said that there's no patriotic duty to pay more than like what your fair share is, right? To what your basic obligations are. And yet if you don't do all of the other things correctly, and make sure that you have a tax plan, and if you have money, that you have an estate plan, if you overlook that area, then that a lot of it can be confiscated, so to speak. It can evaporate. Things like probate can get really expensive, especially if there's a contested will. If there's no will, now you're getting the state's will through state intestacy laws. If there's no POA, you're getting basically the priority that, again, the state of you live in. So the state of Nebraska has succession laws that say, hey, here's the order in which this person's healthcare decisions or financial decisions will be made for them. And it's this list, and like it gets really complicated if you have folks who maybe they're divorced and they're not in a second marriage, but they have a significant other. Well, the state doesn't include significant others at the top of that list. And maybe you want that significant other, but you're not legally married. It's so complicated there. So when it comes to estate planning, a lot of people think of death and taxes, or they think I'll just go talk to an attorney. But again, estate planning is a process. It's not a document. It's not a set of documents. It's a process that has to start with income planning and where's your income going to come from? Do you need a will or a trust? We got a real simple quiz that we can go through. It takes us about 5 minutes, and we're going to have a pretty good idea if a trust is even something we should be including in the discussion. Because so many folks, Jeff, I don't know if you experienced this or not, they come in and maybe their parents had a trust because their parents owned a bunch of farm ground or something like that. And they're like, oh, it was so great to have that trust, so we want a trust too. But the farm ground's been sold. It's all in financial assets. They all have beneficiary designations. The only thing that wouldn't have a beneficiary designation is their primary residence. And that could probably be handled in ways other than just a trust, depending on the value of it and that sort of thing, and what they want to have happen with it. And so they're basing their motivation or their desire for this arrangement off of a apples and oranges type of scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when we look at, that's why I say there's no cookie cutter with the way that we do things here at Stonebridge, is because I'm truly going to sit down with you and I'm going to think of Stonebridge as kind of your financial CFO, your personal CFO, personal financial CFO, chief financial officer. You still sit up here at the top of the rung, right? You top of the ladder, you make all the decisions. At the end of the day, the buck stops here. You get to dictate to us whether or not you're going to give us your blessing to move forward with the strategy or not. But our job is to make sure it's implemented, okay? And that everything is integrated together. So when it comes to your income plan, making sure that the Social Security starts at the right time, the right amount is withheld for taxes from each of the different distributions or income sources that you have, that we're minimizing your tax bill by exchanging ordinary income in the CDs Jeff was talking about for long-term capital gains rates, which could be as much as 0 or as little as 0 if done properly. If we're filling that income gap, making sure that we had money set aside. That's why when people say, you know, am I doing this too early? And they're like 64 years old. No, because if we retire, especially if we retire early, we need a reserve available to fill that gap before things like Social Security are available, before you're age 59 and a half, so we don't have to contend with like a 72T or these challenges to get money out without a penalty from your qualified retirement accounts. All of that is a part of an estate plan, believe it or not. Now, does everybody need an estate plan? Sure, because everybody has something. And, you know, its most critical portion of estate plan for a lot of folks is the powers of attorney, making sure you have an agent who's going to be there if you couldn't get out of bed or if you didn't wake up, like what happens next? Because you want to leave a legacy. You don't want to leave a mess. But that's a choice that everyone listening is going to have to make. Do you want to leave a legacy and have the opportunity to see your legacy play out in front of your eyes while you're living? Or do you want to see them fight over who gets this piece of land or this parcel? And hey, there's money that's being paid out of mom and dad's estate for certain expenses that really are only going to benefit some of the beneficiaries. Like we see this all the time. That's why communication is so critical. And at the end of the day, the reason why you have the documents in place and why we, as your personal CFO, are going to direct you to the right firm or the right group to draft those documents who specialize in what your unique financial situation requires is because our ultimate goal with an estate plan, what we call a legacy plan, is to keep families together, to make sure that you can still go to Thanksgiving next year.
Yes.
And like spend time with the people that you love and care about and continue to maintain a meaningful relationship, because unfortunately many times those relationships are not just strained, but they can be almost ruined if this isn't done properly.
866-295-5146. Call Stonebridge. I know this is seeping into your brain saying, this is important, I better do this. 866-295-5146. This is Retirement Compass Radio Show.
Did you ever think your retirement would be shared with our government? It's true. Your traditional 401k, IRA, pension, or similar retirement accounts are like a partnership with the IRS. Simply put, they want their tax dollars, and you have them. With our latest tax calculator, you can plug in your own numbers while sitting at home. To find out what your future tax liability could be, scan the QR code or go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
Welcome back to the show. We have a bit of a wrap-up. We've been on a roll today. Retirement Compass Radio Show with Stonebridge, going over a scenario for a made-up scenario of a couple, 62 years old, $1 million in their 401ks, and we've gone through the points on the compass. And I just feel like we should continue doing that instead of going to our other segment that we usually do to wrap up the show. Is that okay, fellas?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So are there any other points on the compass that we haven't covered, first of all?
We got them. We got an
Tim.
income, investment, tax, healthcare, legacy.
Great. Now, can I make a point before we get on to the capstone here? Is that when Jeff was talking about the maybe they don't want to use the 401k or the IRA, we don't need that $1 million at all. And here comes 72 years old or 73 years old, and we have to have this big dump of cash and could mess up your taxes, et cetera. Isn't there a way to get to that age without having that money in there and having it already in use elsewhere? Tim?
I mean, there's a lot of ways.
All right, Mr. A lot of sauces.
Mr. Lotta.
Let's have a lot of, because I think that scenario is very prevalent. People, I don't need that money. I'm already set up on the pension I get, and both of our Social Securities. We don't even need that money. Let's leave it over here in that IRA. But it could be a time bomb. There's
good and bad ways to get rid of it. The Aria, Mirage, Flamingo, those are not good ways to get rid of it. Okay, short-lived fun, and maybe not that fun. Good ways to, quote, you're not getting rid of it if you do it the right way, right?
Right.
You're just shifting the location of where those assets are positioned. So
yes, please.
Think of your tax buckets, because again, where I said earlier, I said the place we can move the needle the most is from the tax planning perspective, because I can't control the stock market. So many people, listen to these kind of the gurus, right? And the gurus, because they have these huge syndicated radio programs, this is not syndicated in the sense that this isn't airing on, radio waves across the nation. They should.
It should.
Jeff and I are waiting for a big break to somebody pick this up. But because they have such a broad audience and it's not targeted at, say, retirees or people who are just getting started, it's like, hey, it's this broad spectrum we're talking to. They have to go like an inch deep and a mile wide. And it's just this black and white, paint by the numbers. You should do this. This is bad. This is good, And the Ken Fishers, the Dave Ramseys, the Susie Ormans, that's kind of what they're required to do. And they can't focus in on specific areas like we do at Stonebridge. We go maybe a few feet wide and several miles deep in each one of these 5 different categories to make sure that we get every ounce of benefit that can be harvested in these different specific locations, if you will, realized. We want to realize all those benefits. So within taxes, you've got 3 tax buckets, like Jeff said: taxable, tax deferred, tax free. And my saying, you've heard this before on the program, is in a rising tax rate environment, there's a mathematically ideal balance to have in each of the first 2 buckets, taxable and tax deferred. And any surplus needs to be shifted in a responsible manner to the tax-free bucket. Now, you can't just say, oh, well, I'm going to go shift all that, because now all of a sudden you've opened up Pandora's box of other issues, which is, hey, you just paid at 37% and you weren't ever going to actually be in the 37% bracket. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. By the way, your Medicare here in a couple of years, if you're 63 or older, your Medicare here in a couple of years, because it's a 2-year look back, is going to be sky high. It's through the roof. Now, it's only for the 1 year, but still, you might have unnecessarily burdened yourself with taxes sooner than you needed to. So there's an ideal time frame over which to shift those dollars from location A to location B.
Okay.
Now, some of the software we use, which Jeff could talk about, really is a heavy lift when it comes to trying to figure out how much to do this. It makes it really easy to figure out for us to figure out. It's very sophisticated how much we should be moving, how we're going to pay the tax bill, and whether you should do it or not. Because a lot of people think, oh, I'll just convert all of my tax deferred dollars. And that's a mistake, because you still have a standard deduction. And so a lot of your income that you have, and this is dependent on whether you have a pension or if you have just Social Security plus like RMDs from IRAs or 401ks, a lot of that could be wiped out by a standard deduction. So I would again be paying unnecessary taxes by doing this willy-nilly or shooting from the hip.
Jeff, you want to pick up your part after I give your phone number, 866-295-5146, to reach Stonebridge, 866-295-5146. So much of this is ringing bells, and hopefully folks will call in and say, I do need to talk about that one thing. And look, it all fits together, Jeff. It does. Part of one.
It does, and that's what I love about the software. The tools that we have available to us. One of the financial planning software tools that we use, we're able to plug in all of your information. So we're looking at, okay, how much money do you have in the bank? How much do you have in IRAs, 401ks, Roth IRAs? Maybe you have some farm ground or some livestock, your primary residence. We plug all of this stuff in. So we're organizing all of your assets. We can see, okay, here's your net worth. Then we're looking at the income plan or your goals. So I want to retire at 62. That was our example that we used earlier. So I want to retire at 62. How much do I need to live on? What is healthcare going to cost me in retirement? Because that's a big piece. What is long-term care going to cost if I don't have long-term care insurance? Because I got to pay for it out of pocket. We're going to account for that. Maybe you want to travel. You want to go to Europe or go to Mexico once a year. Whatever the case is, we're going to plug that in. So all of this is your dreams, what you want to happen. Then we get to contributions. If you're still working, how much are you putting in your 401k? We're going to account for all of those things. Then this software that we use, it runs what's called a Monte Carlo simulation. So it runs 1,000 simulations, giving different rates of return, different call it sequences of returns, maybe good years in the first few years, or maybe some bad years in the first few years. That can have a dramatic impact on your probability of success. And it'll tell you, out of those 1,000, how many times would you have run out of money? So that's kind of a starting point. We're looking at, okay, what is your Social Security? When should we draw it? And then we customize everything. So then we can make tweaks. What is your tax liability? How much are your required distributions going to be projected, when you turn 73 or 75? We can project all of these things out. The other big thing is, if you have big one-time expenses, maybe, I just had a new client that they're putting $130,000 a year for 5 years into their home. So I plugged that in, and we're accounting for that, because believe it or not, that's a big chunk. That's going to could have a dramatic impact on their retirement. But we're able to plug all of that in and see what the impact is. Using software like this, what that does for you is it allows you to retire with confidence, because I can look at different scenarios. I can look, okay, what if we see more inflation? We've seen inflation over the last several years. What if, again, the first few years of my retirement, the market goes down? What if I'm taking too much out of the market and now you're going to have to go be a Walmart greeter, at 75? No one wants to do that. But we can put you in a position where you can retire with confidence. So I want you to think about, how would it feel to go into retirement blind? Just saying, I hope it works out. I don't have a plan. My Social Security, I feel like it's enough. And then you get to 75 and now you're paying way more in taxes. Your Medicare you're paying more for that. The alternative is going into retirement with a plan, with confidence, where, okay, I know when I'm taking Social Security because we looked at the math. I know I'm already accounting for my increased healthcare costs because, believe it or not, we don't get more healthy typically as we get older. So there's going to be more costs there, whether it's prescription drugs, dental, vision. Medicare doesn't cover some of those things. So you're going to have to pay for it out of pocket, and we have to account for that. Then the legacy plan, this new client, they had their legacy plan. If they left everything as it was, because they're in 2 different states, they were looking at, $4 to $5 million in estate tax when they die. So what if there's something that we could do to leave that $4 million to their kids instead of to the state that they live in? There's a lot of different things that we can do. So again, go into retirement with confidence, knowing what your plan is. In our workshops, we have a few questions that we ask everyone, as we prepare to end. And one of them, rate 1 to 5. 1, I'm not worried at all. 5, I'm really concerned of the risk of running out of money. If you do that in your head, if you're a 3 or higher, there's absolutely no reason for you not to call. It's totally free, and we can get you on the right path.
Great. 866-295-5146. Get on the right path with Stonebridge. Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. If you'd like to have a look at your tax situation first, well, they go through so many great things with you when you meet with them. But StonebridgeTaxBill.com, anybody's allowed to use that, of course. So it's Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. Good show today, fellas. Any closing comments? Tim?
Yeah, I mean, you got 3 options. You can do it yourself and learn how to do it, and that's going to take a lot of time.
10,000 hours.
You can keep going the way you're going and just hope it works out, like Jeff said, or you can follow Jackie's advice and call Stonebridge.
Yeah. Here's the number again. It's 866-295-5146. Okay, see you next week.
Yep, see ya. Thank you.
Thank you.